So I'm delighted to be joined again today by Mary Rose from Hartland International School in Dubai. What are we going to be covering in these episodes? Well, if you listen to the last one, we were looking at the state of school librarians in the UK. This one, we're moving on a little bit further. We're going to try in these podcasts to discuss some of the real challenges for school librarians in the UK and across the world. We're going to look at things like funding and resources, professional registration, status, workload and unrealistic expectations, the impact on students and the future of school librarians. And I'm sure we can think of more as we go along, so hopefully you get the idea. These will be short 15-minute episodes that we hope you'll find interesting. But as always, we'd love to hear from you, our listeners. If you have something you think we should discuss, then please do get in touch. So today, Mary Rose, we're talking about advocacy and influence. So what's working? Has the Great School Libraries campaign seen any real policy shifts or successes?
Yeah, so the Great School Libraries campaign has been working really hard for the last couple of years, presenting our research findings on how the state of school librarianship in the UK. And we've presented at the House of Commons twice. We've had some really interesting drop-in days for MPs, which we had last summer. Where lots of people were really interested in how they could help and how MPs could help. And this year certainly there have been loads of questions asked in the House of Commons by MPs. So there is a much greater awareness, I think, and I think people are starting to think about it. I think there is still a long way to go.
Yeah.
One of the things that we did at the Great School Libraries was a survey of librarians that ran alongside a survey that we did on Teacher Tap about what people felt or understood about school libraries. And that school librarians survey was really interesting. We had over 400 people answering that survey.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it was really good. And one of the questions we asked was, would you like your role and or the role of the library to be changed, developed, or improved in some way? 76% of people said yes, they would, and 23% said no, which I think is a really just it just shows that there are lots of librarians out there who think that things could be better.
Yeah.
And when we asked them, I mean, I'm sure, I hope quite a lot of people will be listening to this. They did the survey, but we had a question about what would you do if you had a magic wand, and how you could wave it, and how would you like it to change? And most people, there were two things that people said put at their first and second things. One was more stock, but the other, really interestingly, was that it's used for research, inquiry, and is an extension of the classroom. Those two things, what came out tops on when we said if you could change anything in your library. And again, we had a similar, they wanted to be valued as a head and all of that sort of thing. So we've got some really good data, and we know that that school librarians want and feel that they could be doing more and advocating more. The question is how we amplify that message and get it heard, and for people to say, oh yeah, okay, we need that to happen because we know that that's going to benefit children.
So there's a school level, there's a national level, and there's an international level in this conversation, isn't there? If we take it back to school level, where a school librarian may be sitting listening to this thinking, okay, what is it that I can do? I want to do more. I don't have time because I have all these other things to do, but I really want to support teaching within the curriculum. How do we encourage and help school librarians to balance that? And before you answer, I did a blog post about time management. And I strongly believe that actually there are many things that school librarians fill their time with because they're not engaged in the educational process. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's so important that librarians keep themselves busy, keep themselves engaged. But if they're stepping from one position to put themselves in another position, something has to give. They're not going to get
Mm.
any more time. They're not going to get any more staff. So it's really about looking at what they're currently achieving and what they're currently doing and what could be either passed on to pupil librarians who are maybe supporting them in the library, or to be honest, dropped completely, because just because you've done it for the last 2 or 3 years doesn't mean to say that you have to continue doing that. So there's some work for school librarians themselves to do, isn't there, in how can they change so that they've got enough time, and then the next step is how are the school librarians themselves empowering themselves to have conversations with senior leadership about what it is that they're doing. These aren't
Yeah.
easy things for them to do, are they, really?
No, I think what's really important here is that you take on a bit of a sort of a research role to evaluate the impact of what you're doing on children, and whether spending, so let's say you have an initiative where you, I don't know, every year you produce a, a booklet for Christmas reading, or a massively long summer reading list to send home to children, and it takes you forever to do, because you want it to be absolutely perfect and right, and you do it and do it and do it, and you're spending a long time on it, and you send it out into the world. How are you um how are you assessing the impact of that?
Mm,
And how do you know that it's worth doing?
absolutely.
And you know, it's one of the things we do a lot, actually, in those OU teachers reading groups that I run, that are set up by the Open University. When you do a small action research project on a particular area to see the impact of the children, and I think as school librarians, in fact anyone who works in schools, should be always reflecting on whether the job they're doing is an adult job for adults, or whether it's a job you're doing because it's genuinely impacting the children. And
Absolutely.
the more, if you can, and it doesn't take very long to do, actually,
Mm,
it's professional noticing, isn't it?
yeah.
And if you can, it you know, there have been so many times over the years when I've spent hours and hours and hours doing something and thought, who has actually noticed that I've done this? And you know, I might have enjoyed it, but have I made a difference to the most number of people that I possibly could? And if I
Yeah.
haven't, then why am I doing it?
Yeah.
And I think we have to take a very strategic look at that, to be able to measure the impact and say, yeah, I am doing this because actually I know that the impact of it, that I've suddenly got a whole class load of children, or even 5 of those boys that come in every single lunchtime and they're just playing their card games, but I've done a little 1% change, and now all 5 of those boys are in my Carnegie shadowing group and they're reading, or whatever it is that you do. But you are constantly evaluating and taking note of those things, so that then at the end of the year, when you do your reflection at the end and think, oh look, I've got a lovely long summer ahead to get myself ready for September, ha ha, you can say, right, actually this worked really well, I'm going to keep doing this, and I'm going to shove the rest of it, and I'm not going to do it. It may look great on Twitter, but that's not really the point.
And I think the other thing to point out is the fact that whatever a school librarian does needs to link to the aims and goals of the school.
Mm.
So, you know, it's really important that school librarians are looking at what the focus for this year is, but what the focus for this term is. And, you know, a lot of them now are currently looking at literacy levels. So any project that you spend time on needs to be linking, doesn't it? So that, you know, it's not just a nice thing to do. It's not just a fun thing to do. It links with the curriculum development within your school. and then you're assessing how it's had an impact so that you can go back to your senior leadership team and say, hey, this is what I did. You have this problem. What is it? Go with solutions, not problems.
Exactly.
Is to be going, we've run the Carnegie Awards for the last, 15 years, but actually this year I changed it. And now I can demonstrate that actually this is the impact that it had,
Yeah.
and, I think, you know, we've school librarians have always had battles, but there are different ways to play these battles, aren't there? There are different ways to word things. It's a different way of working, and advocacy can become less of a struggle if you're focusing it on something specific rather than just this is what we're doing next, and I think I think it's really important.
Yeah.
There's one final question in this session that I wanted to talk about, and it was what do we think that head teachers and policymakers really actually say behind closed doors? There's I know that the head teachers that I talk to are very pro school libraries, and those have to find the funding from it somewhere. Do you know? Do you think most senior leaders are pro school libraries?
I think you can't be a thinking, educated person and not be pro school library. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
you can't say, yeah, and I don't think anyone would dream of saying, oh no, schools don't need libraries anymore, or not even schools don't need libraries. I mean, we all know that children need access to reading material, um, and and actually they, of course they are. Are they are is their understanding of what we are talking about as a school library the same? I'm not sure. I think
that's
I
true.
think of course, yes, they want to have, they know, everyone knows children should have access to books.
Yeah.
Are they saying, I mean, I had an off the cuff, I don't know, I bumped into an MP, or I think he was a former MP, whoever he was. He was a Conservative, I can't remember his name. And I said, oh, hello, I work for the Great School Libraries campaign. And the first thing he said, and this was we weren't in an official capacity at all. The first thing he said was, oh, well, I mean, primary schools don't need librarians.
No.
There's no money for it. They're totally unnecessary. They just need the books. And it was absolutely, didn't even think about it. And I thought, gosh, that's interesting. This is very indicative of somebody who thinks of a school librarian as being, I suppose, Roald Dahl Matilda's librarian, who quietly
That
sits,
person's sitting, issuing books, and
exactly,
yeah,
shushing people and saying, here's a nice book for you. And and actually, with if you, the skills and the knowledge that a librarian can bring to an environment where children are learning is invaluable, because
yeah,
teachers are, as we know, unbelievably busy, have
yeah,
hugely high expectations put on them, are trying desperately to get the children in their doors and out again, having passed all the exam and data points that they need to, and they don't have time, um, nor I would suggest at some stages the training to be able to think about reading and research and inquiry deeply, because they are so busy in their job of just doing what's expected of them.
yeah,
And a librarian is able to take so much of that weight off a teacher and support them and do quite a lot of that work for them, so that then, we all know, the research says, the reading for pleasure research says that if teachers talk to their children about reading books, read the same books with them, and read books aloud to them, children are going to be readers. And
Yeah.
and actually, I've always argued that a librarian once a week saying to children, you must read books, is not actually particularly useful, because they all go, yeah, we've heard it all before, and you're paid to say that. But when their teacher,
Yeah.
who has, I don't know, who goes surfing at the weekend and has a tattoo and is just the coolest man ever, when he talks to them about reading books, they want to do what he does. They want
Yeah.
to model him. So we take an awful lot of that role. So we become strategic partners and say, okay, we can help with this. We can help support your curriculum development. We can help you understand how AI, research skills, fake news, and everything else can be brought into your classroom. We can provide you with those things because that's what we're experts at. And
Absolutely. And actually bringing it in at primary level is essential. The fact that, you know, we shouldn't be suddenly saying that, oh, you're 14 now, you should be able to do this, without having put the building blocks in place that
exactly,
allows our students to be, and children to be, critical thinkers and people who have opinions that they can talk about confidently, and, you know, gather the information that they need to to create those opinions. So, you know, I can understand funding is an issue. I really can understand funding is an issue, and we're going to talk about that in the next episode. But actually, anything that is essential, money is found for. And I believe that schools need to stop thinking about libraries and librarians as something that sits on the side. And actually, they need to be sat front and centre of the curriculum, so that the science teacher, the PE teacher, the history teacher, the geography teacher has as much right to have the library within their curriculum as the English department.
yeah,
And we all know that the English department tends to be the library department. Well, that shouldn't happen anymore. And actually, you know, when we talk about the funding for school libraries, we're talking about a whole school resource, not just the library resource or just the English department resource.
yeah, I
Right,
couldn't
I'm
agree
gonna stop there. Thank you so much for listening. If you'd like to subscribe to our podcast so you don't miss any future discussions, that would be great. Thanks again for listening.